On today's show, a historic comeback as Tyrese Haliburton's buzzer beater forces overtime where the Pacers took game one against the Knicks. Indiana's hero down the stretch. What went wrong for New York and more? It's all coming up right here at Locked On NBA Game Night.
When that final buzzer rings, you know it's time for Locked On NBA Game Night. All the post-game reactions to every game across the league, every single night, with insights only the hosts at Locked On can provide. It's the true NBA fans' one stop for all the action. Every game, every night. It's Locked On NBA Game Night. Tipping off now.
What is up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA Game Night. Every game, every night. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And joining me is my partner in crime, David Ramil, host of Locked On Heat. David, what did you see in that absolutely insane game that took place last night?
I think that sums it up. We saw a little bit of everything in one game. What I'm hoping we saw it was a classic series ready to unfold, because if that game was just a precursor to what we'll see, it could go all seven. And if that's the case, it's going to be an all-time great.
It feels like we are teeing up an all-time classic, right? Another in a long list of all-time classics between the Pacers and the Knicks. First, we want to thank you guys for making Locked On NBA Game Night your first listen each and every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. And man, what a game do we have here for you as the Pacers take game one of the Eastern Conference Finals, a historic and improbable come from behind win, 138-135 final score in overtime. David, let me hit you with this stat. Over the last 27 years, NBA teams were 0-970, 0 wins, 970 losses when down by 14 or more in the final 2 minutes and 50 seconds of regulation in the playoffs. They are now 1-970 with this Pacers win. Just
I could not have guessed that. Yeah, I could not have guessed that the numbers were so lopsided, but I guess it makes sense given that typically in the playoffs you have such superior level of play, you have the very best teams in the league, and when they have a lead like that, typically, I guess they can hang on to it. But what a performance from Aaron Nesmith. What a heroic performance. 20 points in the second half. He was just great. He was really, really spectacular. And then Tyrese Haliburton also stepping up big and hitting a big shot down the stretch as well.
We have so much to talk about from the Pacers win on this side of the game. We're going to get out to Locked On Pacers for the instant reaction first.
At one point, doing these was a hard, unique challenge. Now it's not. The Pacers do this over and over. Unbelievable. They beat the Knicks in overtime. Tyrese Haliburton is a superhero. Aaron Nesmith has a longer cape than Tyrese Haliburton. What a game. Pacers down 17 in the fourth quarter, 14 inside of 3 minutes, 9 inside the last 40 seconds, and they win. Ridiculous threes from Aaron Nesmith, hitting 6 in the final 5 minutes of this game. An absurd Tyrese Haliburton shot that bounced out of this arena and back in to tie it at the buzzer. He thought it was a 3. The whole world thought it was a 3. It was not. In overtime, they start down poorly, and they fight back. This team has no quit. They've done this 3 times in 2 weeks. You don't beat the Pacers, they just run out of time. Today, they did not run out of time. They found a way to come back and beat the Knicks. They lead the Eastern Conference Finals 1-0. They've got to defend Brunson better. They've got to defend Cat better. They don't care. They won the game. They summoned something somehow again in the final minutes. They're up 1-0. Game 2 days from now. Locked On Pacers will be there again.
David, just and to the point of we saw the insane Haliburton shot that looked like at first glance it looked like a game winner, and my goodness, it felt like Hallie had just snatched the entire soul of New York City in that moment. The ball bouncing back iron, going up above the shot clock, and then falling back into the net, and you could just hear like the crowd was just like struck, the silence washing over, and everybody was just distraught. And Haliburton hit the choke job celebration, the Reggie Miller. It was classic. And then you get the replay, and everybody's saying, "Oh, foot on the line, foot on the line." It was enough to tie it up, though. and send it to overtime. Haliburton said after the game in his post-game interview, it felt right at the time. If I would have known it was a two-pointer, I wouldn't have done it. So he said he felt he might have wasted his chance having burnt it on a game-tying shot instead of a game winner, but still an incredible buzzer beater nonetheless that did send them to overtime. But we got to talk first about how the Pacers kind of found themselves in that position, right? Down 17, down 14, under 3 minutes to go. And then truly the hero for the Pacers here was Aaron Nesmith. Another NBA record, 6 3-pointers made in the fourth quarter. The first player in NBA playoff history to hit 6 threes in the fourth and final quarter of a game. Finished the night with 30 points on 9 of 13 shooting, including 8 of 9 from downtown. Again, 6 of those triples coming in that fourth and final frame, 4 at the charity stripe. And man, he almost single-handedly brought the Pacers back with that just insane barrage of threes there in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, those shots were not easy. Like, he was curling off screens. He was in motion, drifting to his right on a number of those. And just whatever it was, like, the shot was going to fall. You knew it at that point in time. And you figure at some point New York would try to tweak their defense. Maybe they got a little complacent. Maybe they tried to do something to send a different defender, and Nesmith, and just nothing seemed to work by that point. He's got the length, he's got the size to be able to rise up over almost any defender, but just the shots, the degree of difficulty on each of those shots seemed more difficult than the previous one, and he was still nailing them. That and incredible to imagine that this is basically a role player in Nesmith, but he was so electric in those last few minutes of the game. And I don't know. Some of it is, and we'll talk about this in the next segment, the Knicks certainly getting a little complacent, but you have to give Nesmith a lot of credit for just saying, you know what? I don't care. Even if we're down by this wide a margin, there's still hope. And that's just what the Pacers do, to Tony's point. Like, this is how they've operated for most of the season. This is how they've operated in the playoffs. And Nesmith, as Tony said, wearing a longer cape than anybody. That was a great line.
Oh, absolutely. And look, Nesmith was the guy that really kind of brought the Pacers back into it. Obviously, Tyrese Haliburton, the big shot there to force overtime, right? To have the Haliburton had that moment where he drove, right? And then, pulled it back out on Mitchell Robinson and turned around with, like, he had to have looked at the opposite, right? The Pacers court shot clock to know, okay, time's running down. I have to turn around and just get this shot up. And he had Mitchell Robinson right there in front of him. And I'm really surprised with Robinson's length that he wasn't able to get even like a fingertip on that ball, knowing that a shot was coming with the clock winding down. And then just that shot goes in. And then we get to overtime, where I was really impressed with Obi Toppin in overtime and Andrew Nembhard kind of down the stretch, both of those guys, and Obi Toppin with kind of the dagger to kind of seal it, right? That double clutch dunk off the inbounds play, knowing that the Pacers had to find a way to get the ball inbounds one more time, with the Knicks still, with a little bit of life there, only down 1. And then, Nembhard is able to run, a quick little screen and roll with Obi Toppin, and then Toppin goes up and double clutches in the air, gets fouled, mind you, too. He got hit, contact, no call there, and was able to still convert. And that was all she wrote for Indiana. Just an insane end to this game.
Absolutely. It was incredible. Those performances down the stretch there. But I mean, that's what it is with this Pacers team, right? Like, again, you get a great player like Haliburton, you expect, as most teams do, you're going to go to your superstar in those moments. And yet he winds up hitting that clutch shot to send them into overtime. He winds up knocking in another bucket in overtime. And then it's guys like Nesmith, guys like Nembhard, guys like Toppin stepping up. And that's just really what the strength of this team is. Whereas the Knicks wind up relying so heavily on Towns and Brunson to carry the brunt of their offense. You can get a game like this where Haliburton is incredible, and yet he doesn't have to dominate down the stretch, because you get so many other players that are empowered to contribute at such a high level, and feeling the ability and having the courage to say, you know what, even though we're in these tight situations, we're in a really clutch moment here, the willingness to take those shots and to be able to connect on those. This team is really, really impressive. You don't see this very often. And I just, a phenomenal performance from a team that I think has flown under the radar for most of the season and is finally getting their due, I think, because they've earned it and they've proven this all year, the capacity to do these kinds of things. But as far as specifically Nembhard and Toppin stepping up in overtime, Nesmith before that, just great performances, really big shots on the stretch. Toppin having a big putback dunk also when it looked like they were going to be, where the Knicks were going to continue to build their lead, and Toppin winds up saying, you know what, no, we're going to keep this a little closer than we'd like, and be able to keep pace with the Knicks, and then eventually just pull away.
I want to give some credit to Rick Carlisle and the coaching staff too. Not only for the decision to roll with Obi Toppin to close out the game, right? Going with that decision, him over Myles Turner down the stretch of the game, certainly an interesting choice there that ultimately paid off. But also two very key kind of inflection points in this game were both challenges that the Pacers won. There was the challenge that was originally on the floor, ruled a foul call, I believe, on Pascal Siakam, and I think it was OG Anunoby fighting for the loose ball. And then it wound up being overturned, and then the Pacers kept possession of the basketball, and that was back in late in the fourth quarter. And then there was the challenge in overtime where Andrew Nembhard had knocked the ball, deflected the pass off of Jalen Brunson. And that was another key inflection point where that gave the Pacers back the basketball, right? That was a significant kind of turning point there, where at that point, the Knicks had a shot, right? They would have been able to draw up another play, get another inbounds, have a chance to come back and take the lead on that possession. And yet they weren't able to do so because of the very savvy use of challenges by the Indiana Pacers coaching staff. And not a lot of people know this, but the head coach isn't usually responsible for calling the challenges. There's usually a guy dedicated to doing that on the bench with an iPad. Although there was, I think for the second challenge, like the iPad guy ran to Coach Carlisle and was like, do we want this? Tell me, right? Yeah. And so, and you saw Nembhard, he was like, challenge it. That was off Brunson, right? So some very important moments for the Pacers there as well. Just incredible start to finish, man.
Yeah, and conversely, Tom Thibodeau using his challenge earlier in the game, and it was an unsuccessful challenge and not being able to use it. A couple plays there were, replay would show that maybe it was a foul that was erroneously called, or a turnover, or maybe a ball that went out of bounds off of a Pacers player. Like they could have used it down the stretch, and they didn't. And like I remember a moment there where I think Aaron Nesmith was calling. I think it was a foul that he was called for, and he was really prolifically calling for the call for the challenge, and Carlos like just saying for the sidelines, "Oh, go just shut up and play."
Back.
Basically,
go back.
Yeah. And that was the smart thing to do, because down the stretch they needed those challenges, and they had the ability to use them, unlike Thibodeau and the Knicks.
Absolutely. I've never understand the idea of, burning a challenge early in a game, especially this kind of a game where it's probably going to come down to the wire. But coming up, how the Knicks fell apart down the stretch of this game and what they need to adjust for game 2. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, overtime action like in this one, major momentum shifts and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot, a buzzer beater like Tyrese Haliburton's, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Which players are showing up in the biggest moments, and how could tracking their trends help you build your next bet? What would it look like to combine live prop bets mid-game based on how the game action actually unfolds? And right now you can head on over to FanDuel.com. Take a look at some of the odds for these playoffs as they continue. Right now, the OKC Thunder -7.5 favorites for game 2, and then the Knicks -6 favorites for game 2 in this Eastern Conference series. If you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. And continuing on here at Locked On NBA Game Night. Thanks so much for making Game Night your first listen each and every day. For your next listen, go check out Locked On Pacers with Tony East, who we just heard from, or go swing by Locked On Knicks for their reaction to this gut-wrenching loss after it felt like they kind of had this one in hand, up 14 with under 3 minutes left to play. Let's go out to Locked On Knicks for their demoralized reaction to this game.
Well, that really sucked. The Knicks lose 138-135 to the Pacers, game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals, after being up by 15 plus in the final few minutes. They blew it. I mean, you can look at it. You could see there was a missed goaltend if you want to, find an excuse down the stretch of the game. But the fact of the matter is that the Knicks, with 3 minutes to go, assumed that they had this game in hand and that they were just going to be able to dribble the air out of the ball and just leave their home floor with a game 1 win. And they let their foot off the gas. They played garbage defense on the other end. They let Aaron Nesmith shoot like a million threes and make all of them. By the time that they finally defended him, like I actually think Josh Hart defended him half decent on his last one that he made. He was already too nuclear to stop. And then Tyrese Haliburton makes one that bounces up, like hits the Jumbotron, and then comes back down into the hoop to tie it. I thought maybe a little bad juju would be him hitting the choke thing before going to overtime, when it actually was just to tie the game rather than win it. But either way, the Knicks blew it in overtime too. I think Jalen Brunson was playing like his worst self. I think that he was feeling some type of way about the officiating, and even though he got 40 points, I don't think he did them any favors in overtime. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Knicks sucked, man. That's it. You got to come back game 2 now, and now the pressure's on you to go win on the road and then take care of business back at home the rest of these games. So we'll see if they got what it takes, but certainly didn't have it in game 1. Hopefully they have it in game 2. We'll have it for you on Locked On Knicks.
I love Alex is definitely feeling a little down bad after this New York Knicks loss. Look, I will say, I thought the Knicks actually did, to his point, right? Knicks did choke this game away, but I actually thought that their resolve, once Jalen Brunson picked up that 5th foul with like 10 minutes to go in the 4th quarter and had to go sit down, right? That was a really important moment for them. And OG Anunoby came up big with like 5 straight points to give them a little bit of cushion. And then they just built on that. They went on what ultimately became, I believe, a 14-0 run to balloon that lead up to 17, right? And take that, and be kind of taking full control of the game at that point. And if you had told me that Jalen Brunson picked up his 5th foul with 10 minutes to go in the 4th quarter, I would have been like, oh yeah, it would have been Pacers all the way. But the Knicks responded so well in those minutes. And I'm what did you see happening, David, as to how the Knicks kind of let this game get away? I know obviously we talked about, Nesmith just, going unconscious from 3 and some defensive lapses there, but it was also, maybe some of the offensive stuff, right? That they just weren't converting on the other end either.
Yeah, it's fair. I mean, it's so much of their team kind of ties their defense to their offense. You'd be able to generate an easier look that way, and for force a turnover, maybe get a rebound and kind of ignite your fast break opportunity there. But that wasn't the case, especially when Nesmith is nailing those shots there. So you're kind of forced to go into a half-court offense, and with Brunson maybe being a little timid down the stretch, or maybe unwilling to force something that might draw a 6th foul. They didn't really have many options there, and they kept substituting Towns. I think they took Towns out for Mitchell in that last minute of gameplay too, and they really didn't have anything set there. I guess this would be the biggest knock probably on Thibodeau, and maybe those in-game adjustments that he has historically not been able to make. But it's kind of really hard to find fault with it. From a Knicks perspective, like, I get it. They're down. You don't expect to lose a game like that. But I don't know that you can prepare for the barrage from Nesmith that we saw there. I don't know that they really could have done anything differently. I know Alex's point was that maybe they didn't defend him early on, and then he started catching so much fire that by the time they started defending him a little bit more closely, that he was just unstoppable. And the commentators were saying that, the broadcast booth was saying that about that in the game, early in the game, when it was a high score game and both teams shot extraordinarily well and everything. It wasn't like defense wasn't being played. So I don't know what the critique is. I don't know what you could have done differently to defend those teams when they were just shooting lights out. And in the case of the 4th quarter, that stretch in particular from Nesmith, I don't know. It didn't seem like anything New York could have done was going to impede those shots from falling. And maybe they got a little complacent there, but I didn't see anything that stood out particularly egregiously from the Knicks or anything they couldn't do. They just weren't able to generate the kind of looks that they were hoping for. But you typically, again, with that kind of a lead, you think you're going to be able to do just enough. You just don't expect a team like the Pacers to play near perfect, if not perfect itself, basketball for 2 minutes of gameplay that wind up sending you into overtime.
No, you're absolutely right there. It kind of like reacting to this game might kind of I guess lukewarm reaction is similar to yours. Like maybe if you're the Knicks, you don't have to like change anything massive going into game 2. Like you were winning this game. In fact, you were winning this game despite some of the obstacles placed in your way, right? Brunson with the 5 fouls, having to sit for those very crucial kind of 5 minutes there in the fourth quarter. He sat from the 10-minute mark and up until about, I think he was reinserted with exactly 5 minutes left to play in the game. But, you know, down the stretch of this one, that stretch with New York leading by 14 with 2:50 left to play, the Pacers over that final 2 minutes and 50 seconds of regulation and then the 5 minutes of overtime scored 33 points in that was 7 minutes and 50 seconds of game time, which is just kind of absurd. 14 from Aaron Nesmith, 7 from Haliburton, 7 from Nembhard, a couple points from Obi Toppin, the putback, the double clutch dunk there at the end to kind of, seal the game. On the other end for the Knicks, though, and this is the thing that I think we do have to highlight here, is as great as Brunson was, 43 points, 15 of 25 shooting, was 12 of 14 at the free throw line. The Pacers defense was giving him some trouble. He had 7 turnovers in this game, 3 of them coming across that period at the end of regulation and then in the overtime period as well. And that's where I think the Knicks did get a little sloppy with the basketball. And I don't know if this is, they were making a really big point about this on the broadcast. And I'm not super ready to buy into it this early in the series, right? But the idea of it being kind of a war of attrition here, right? We know Tom Thibodeau likes to run his key rotation guys into the ground. We know those Knicks starters are playing, basically 40 plus minutes a night every game. Whereas the Pacers, it's kind of like the battle between going heavy with your starters versus like relying on the depth of your team. The Pacers felt like they were a little bit more fresh down the stretch of this game, I think. Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And I think that certainly it looked to be the case. Like Brunson was carrying so much of the offensive load. And I mean, between him and Towns, that was really the case for most of the game. It's just like you have to get players like Anunoby, Hart, Mikal Bridges, like they have to be able to step up there. But New York's depth is so lacking. You're not going to get any kind of reliable contribution off the bench. As good as Mitchell Robinson was, and he was incredibly impactful, I think, in his minutes, particularly in the rebounding end, and also being able to just key in some great defensive possessions there for the Knicks. But you're not getting any kind of offensive production. That falls specifically on Brunson and Towns. And Towns a little bit more inconsistent. I think there were some open shots there towards the end that he probably would have hit or could have hit, and it was a couple of air balls as well. Brunson hit an air ball as well. I know it was a little wonky offensively, but I can't fault Brunson because he was just so much of what New York was able to do, and it should have been enough. At that point in time, like, I know he's a star. I know he's supposed to carry your team to a wide degree, but you've got to get some help there. Somebody has to be able to step up in those moments. And as good as Anunoby and Towns were in that stretch, as you pointed out earlier, when Brunson was out of the game, keep your team's lead. Like, you just can't let it just vanquish as quickly as they did either. Yeah, to that point, I want to highlight really quickly here a couple stats largely in favor of the Pacers, and this is something that the Knicks are going to have to clean up going into game 2. 15 New York turnovers, again, 7 of them coming from Jalen Brunson, to the tune of 27 Pacers points. The Pacers were plus 23 in points off turnovers. The Knicks only had 4 points scored off the Pacers' 7 turnovers. So Pacers doing a fantastic job taking care of the basketball. And then to that point about depth and kind of the needing some additional contributions, off the bench, or just where are they going to get more production? 31-17 bench points in favor of Indiana here. So a plus 14 in the bench scoring department. One thing that we saw for a small stretch in this game that I think the Knicks and Thibodeau are going to have to lean into further, given how impactful he was in his minutes in this game. Double big lineup, right? Mitchell Robinson and Karl-Anthony Towns. If you can get Robinson up to closer to around 30 or so minutes, look, I understand Bridges and Anunoby are both very impactful defenders. They're your 2 best wing defenders. They help counteract some of the defensive deficiencies, if you will, of Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns. Because I'll be honest, for stretches, look, there wasn't a plentiful amount of defense being played in this game to begin with. But both Towns and Brunson had stretches where they were really struggling in this one, especially with kind of the show and recover scheme that the Knicks were kind of running. Tyrese Haliburton was just picking them apart in the pick and roll at times. Myles Turner got going really, early on, had 11 first quarter points just because they were just completely terrorizing them in the pick and roll. Cat looked lost, basically the entire first quarter. But But I think if you run Mitchell Robinson a bit more with that double big lineup and Karl-Anthony Towns out there, then you can get a little bit additional rest for guys like Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby, and then they'll be a little bit fresher as the game wears on. And just having Robinson out there, right? They talked about it on the broadcast, but Cat is a guy that's accustomed to playing with another big, right? He played with Rudy Gobert, and so for him to be out there and kind of playing the 4 out there with Robinson at the 5, having all that additional size, I don't really know that there's a counter that Indiana can throw out there other than, Myles Turner and Thomas Bryant at the same time. And I can't really see Carlisle going that route. I think that could be, an ace up the sleeve of Tom Thibodeau that they maybe go to next game in the series.
I think that's a great point. And I've got to say, I think if any player has to step up specifically, I'm looking at OG, to be honest with you, because I just think that early in the game, at least what I saw, maybe I'm reading a little into it, but it seemed like Siakam was just dominating that matchup. And maybe it's the familiarity that two players had when they were, all sharing a Raptors jersey there. And like maybe the understanding that he's the older vet and OG at the time was still just a young player in this league trying to figure it out. And Siakam just kind of, I don't know. It seemed like he was much more comfortable in that matchup than he could have been, considering how good a defender Anunoby is. And yet he just looked a little lost out there. He couldn't compensate for Siakam's moves. Siakam defended him well. Conversely, he struggled offensively. It looked like he got into his head a little bit. Eventually, he did wind up turning it on during that stretch after Brunson came out. But by then, it was not nearly enough, although it did give New York that lead that seemed insurmountable at the time, and yet clearly was not.
Coming up, the wait is finally over as Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is officially named this year's NBA MVP. But does it even matter? Is the hype completely dead surrounding this award? We're going to talk about that coming up here in just one moment. And final segment here at Locked On NBA Game Night. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is named this year's NBA MVP. Let's hear from Locked On Thunder for the reaction to the news that I think a lot of people were kind of expecting at this point.
There's no longer debate or doubt. SGA is the NBA's MVP. His first MVP award, the Thunder's third MVP of their short franchise's history. I'm Rylan Stiles, host of Locked On Thunder. This is a much-deserved MVP for SGA. He was dominant this season, doing things with efficiency, scoring at a high clip, so much so that he led the league in scoring, and keeping this Thunder team afloat, which sounds crazy because they won 68 games. What might shock you, as the Thunder were projected to be the 1 seed yet again, they didn't get here with the best circumstances. They start the season missing Isaiah Hartenstein and Jay Will and Kenrich Williams, and then throughout the season miss Alex Caruso. J-Dub spent time injured, and of course Chet Holmgren broke his hip on November 10th. And if I would have told you back then that OKC would still go on to win 68 games, you would not believe me. But it was entirely due to SGA's heroics as a heliocentric offensive guard who dazzles in the mid-range and gets to his spots at will, able to create buckets for himself whenever he wants, and his ability to weather the storm defensively. Like, the Thunder have a ton of great defenders. He's a good one, and he's able to let the Thunder have a historically great defense, which they've used to parlay into postseason success. This is, of course, a regular season award where SGA was dominant from start to finish in the regular season, and after finishing top 5 in MVP voting for the last 3 years, this is his time to be number 1 after being runner-up last year and number 5 the year before. So SGA wins his first MVP award. We'll have it all on Locked On Thunder.
All right, David. I got to be completely honest here. I don't even care anymore. Like, it's the NBA has they've botched this awards announcement schedule so much to where we literally had the two guys who were the two front runners, all the narrative, the buzz surrounding them, all year long between SGA and Jokic, and they announced the actual award after that series comes to an end. I feel like the NBA needs to fix this moving forward, because having that award announced mid-series as those two guys were going head-to-head would have added so much more weight to that series. It would have Nuggets fans would have been pissed. Thunder fans would have felt vindicated. It would have been awesome to have that added. I go back to thinking about when the Rockets and Spurs met in the conference finals, way back in the 90s, and David Robinson was awarded the MVP trophy, and Hakeem Olajuwon felt incredibly slighted by that trophy. Watched the presentation taking place, and there's the story of him leaning over to Kenny Smith and saying, that's my trophy. And just watching him completely dominate David Robinson in that series on the way to the Rockets title run. So I feel like the NBA needs to recalibrate maybe how they do some of these awards or something like that.
100%. They've missed the mark on what they should be promoting. They think of it as, well, we want these award recipients to get their due. And so there's this slow rollout where you get kind of teased for defensive player of the year, sixth man, etc. All rookie teams, all these things taking place here. But by the time the award is announced, like 80% of the fan base, if not more, I can't do the math right now, but a significant part of NBA fandom is shut down. They're not really following these things as closely. They're following the basketball. The basketball is what's most intriguing, and the basketball is much more interesting than who gets the MVP awarded by this point. But that's also made more interesting if these awards are given out much earlier on in the process so that you can create that tension. We know this is what NBA players do. They thrive on these perceived slights, and somebody's going to take it personally. You don't think, as good as Jokic was in the Western semifinals, like how much better could he have possibly been? Like if he had been announced already, or he knew that Shai as a competitor, I don't know. Maybe Jokic bring an extra level to his game, and maybe they challenge Oklahoma City a little bit more in that Game 7. I don't know. It's just, I think it's important for the NBA to give the recipients the process and everything else like that. But the award is less important than the playoff basketball and creating that sense of excitement about being able to promote that the MVP plays for Oklahoma City. That what we're watching early on in the playoffs could be, or is at that point, should have been recognized as the best player in the league.
I wonder if the NBA, and we talk about, rest and all this stuff all the time, but I wonder if the NBA could benefit from maybe I doubt that they want to do this, but, they tried the award show BS that one time or a couple years there. And I wasn't a huge fan of that, but maybe just like a slight delay between the end of the regular season and the start of the play-in tournament, right? To give teams a little bit of rest before, starting the playoff gauntlet. And if they could just announce the awards there, like take a week off, week of no games or something like that. And then, spend every day announcing the awards, hyping things up, celebrating the end of what is the regular season, and then going into, okay, great, we've got here's playoffs, and now everybody can be upset. Okay, this person didn't win DPOY, or they did win MVP, or what have you. Right. Because you're right, so many of these fan bases, are at this point, checked out, because the regular season, literally, it's been a month and a half since regular season basketball was being played, right? And we're announcing an award for regular season basketball. And here's the wild thing is, how lame would it have been? I know that the Thunder are in the Western Conference Finals, but if the Thunder had been eliminated in the conference semifinals and the Nuggets went on, how embarrassing would that have been? Okay, here's your MVP award, Shai. Here, congratulations. Have him up on the podium accepting the award. And he's like, thanks. This means a lot, but the Thunder are out, right? It didn't happen that way, but it very well could have. And so that's what needs to be addressed.
Didn't it happen with Embiid? By the time he was the award recipient, he was already out of the playoffs? Yeah. So it's it feels anticlimactic. It's oh, you're that good, but what are you doing still in Cancun there, buddy? I'm glad you cut your vacation short in order to collect this award that you desperately wanted and begged and pled for. But yeah, here you are. It doesn't really feel as much. Again, I think that's a great idea. At the end of the regular season, give it a process, give some time there, allow fans to digest it. Even the fan bases like your Charlottes or your Washingtons that are really looking forward to the draft or next year already, at least they're still somewhat more engaged. And so at least they get to revel in the moment and kind of enjoy and appreciate the greatness of their player. And I don't know, the playoffs to me are more about trying to draw in these peripheral fans more than the hardcore fans. And they kind of need to have some kind of market team is the best player in the league. It's too late. Maybe you can hype it up if the Thunder wind up going on to the finals, but at this point you miss a golden opportunity, I think.
We appreciate you guys for being here with us on Locked On NBA Game Night. We definitely want your thoughts in the YouTube comments. What's your reaction to Pacers-Knicks Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals, with the Pacers taking Game 1, coming out on top due to the historic comeback, the Tyrese Haliburton choke gesture, all that good stuff. Give us your thoughts there. Give us your thoughts on SGA winning this year's NBA MVP. Does the NBA need to adjust their announcement schedule so they can actually kind of build and capitalize off the hype that some of these awards awards should be generating from the regular season. Let us know your thoughts in the YouTube comments. But for your next listen, go find the Locked On Show for your favorite team. Until then, we will catch you guys on our very next game night.